So I'm running for the Senate, and I should mention my friends and my colleagues in the House call that a demotion. But seriously, this is an incredible opportunity not only to fill an office, but to take part in governing the state. Over the last 4 years, a core group of Republicans and independent Democrats have proven that conservatives can govern, that we can put together great budgets and prioritize government spending, that we can forge coalitions and bridge old divides. The Majority Coalition Caucus has proven that it can solve problems for Washingtonians in education, transportation, healthcare, human services, and the environment. It's proven that we can make our communities better by working together instead of apart. And it's proven that we can find solutions that make the whole state better off. So as I think about joining in a governing team that is already well underway in its work, I want to tell you about a few of the things I'll be working on. First of all of us in the legislative arena are called to work on the issue of education funding. That is the big challenge facing us in both the short term and the long term. And while we've been making progress in state funding for education, we have a big problem, which is the inequity of local levy funding. We need to make education funding equitable across school districts so that kids from every socioeconomic background have the same opportunities, and that's going to take a tremendous amount of compromise and hard work and collaboration. And I should mention Bruce Dammeier leaves a big void because he has been such a leader on this issue, but I believe that we are capable of doing the work at hand as Republicans and Democrats who care about the future of this state. Second, we need a new culture of accountability in state government. Bill Bryant talks about this out on the campaign trail. So whether we're talking about DSHS or the Department of Corrections, Department of Transportation, we need to reform the bureaucracy and demand results. Former Governor Dan Evans, who created a lot of the agencies that are around to this day in state government, he says one of his biggest regrets about creating those agencies is he didn't put a sunset clause on the enabling legislation. And the point about that is not that these aren't, not that government shouldn't be doing these things. It is that government becomes stagnant unless you reform it from time to time and keep it nimble and keep it limited and keep it efficient and accountable to the people. And so we need to reform and in many cases downsize the bureaucracy. And we need to insist on legislative review of major regulations and administrative rulings so that we can prevent unelected bureaucrats from making laws that cost our businesses, our property owners, and our communities. And finally, we need political leadership when it comes to an issue that we've been talking a lot about here in Puyallup, and that's the issue of homelessness. Last month, we had over 400 people gathered for a meeting that Bruce, Melanie, and I hosted at Pioneer Park Pavilion to discuss this issue. And I've spent a lot of time lately talking with people, getting their input, discussing different ways to go about addressing the issue of homelessness. And I want to cut to the chase about what I think is needed when it comes to homelessness. We need leadership from elected officials, leadership to ask the tough questions about what's working and what's not. There's a lot that's not working about how we've made policy on homelessness and about poverty in general over the last 50 years. We've had a war on poverty for 50 years, but it's not working out. And we've spent a lot of money that hasn't had results. And our dominant strategies on homelessness have not been working. Elected leaders have conveniently turned some of our issues of poverty over to the bureaucracy to set the direction. And so we haven't had the kind of leadership that we really need. And so we're faced with a growing challenge of chronic adult homelessness that impacts so many communities. Let me suggest 5 things that I think we need to do and that we can do realistically in the legislature. First of all, we need to fund behavioral health. Mental health is a key part of state government in our state constitution. Secondly, we need to make housing more affordable. And there are some creative solutions on the table that we need to take up. We need to have a bipartisan conversation about that and come up with solutions that get everybody on board. Third, we need to remove some barriers to jobs and affordable housing for those who have challenging backgrounds. This is another area where it's going to take people coming together, working across the aisle to find solutions. Fourth, we need to expand the Washington Conservation Corps, a program that benefits veterans and youth, but we need to expand it to provide work to able-bodied adult men who need something productive to do, who may have difficult backgrounds and can't get into employment otherwise, but we need to expand the Washington Conservation Corps. And fifth, we need to support interventions that work. We need to recognize that there are no one-size-fits-all solutions. There are models that are out there that we can borrow from and that we can support and that we can leverage. The Salvation Army, the Goodwill, the Tacoma Rescue Mission are just some examples of organizations doing incredible work here in Pierce County. And they have three things in common. One is volunteer engagement. Another thing is an emphasis on work. And another thing is an emphasis on relationships. Because at the end of the day, human problems need relational solutions. I remember when I was first running for the legislature, and I repeat this everywhere I go, Joyce McDonald told me, relationships are more important than policies. And relational solutions can be slow, they can be hard, and they can be imperfect. But the fact is that we as family members, neighbors, and friends can love one another a heck of a lot better than bureaucracies can. Where government has a role, it should be to leverage the influence of relationships to reinforce them and not to take their place. So that's the great challenge for political leaders in our time, to make the case for communities instead of bureaucracies. It's easy to go out and campaign on government doing more. What's hard is to challenge people to do more for their communities. And yet that is what is so badly needed. We need a renewed commitment to service in our churches, our neighborhoods, our workplaces, and most of all, our families. So now that I'm a married man with a family of my own, family is something I appreciate more than ever. And the little family unit and the extended families to which we belong are the most important social safety net there ever was. Family is irreplaceable. I'm certainly blessed to have come from a family that's so loving and so supportive. So around here, there's so many Zeigers, that they had to build an elementary school just to accommodate all of them. And the question that I get asked more often than any is, are you related to the elementary school? Turns out I am related to Ed Zeiger, who's here, I think back here, right there. So recently, my dad sent out an email to some family members, and in it he attached a handwritten essay from my great-grandpa, Ernest Zeiger. It was written in 1984. He wrote about his upbringing. That was a solid world we grew up in. Even poverty and pain were taken with a certain resignation. You planted your feet and toughed it out because that's just the way things are. I wonder what it's like to be a boy now. We have so much, and so much to lose. If you know a child, offer your hand with love and stay close by. Every child needs a solid way to deal with life. And then my dad, passing these lessons on down through the generations, closed his email with a word of thanks and a word of exhortation that I suppose we can all stand to consider. Thank you for being there to offer your hand and love to Clara as she starts her own journey and writes her own story. Stay close by. Every child needs a solid way to deal with life. And isn't that the challenge to which each of us is called in our respective ways? To stay close to those who need us and to brighten our little part of the world so that it's better for those who come after us. There are those like my great-grandpa or like Bob Nielsen or like so many of you here in this room who've done that in extraordinary ways. And as I try my best to emulate that kind of service to others as your state legislator, I ask for your support and your partnership in this time we've been given. Thank you.